Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Trinidad and Tobago's Economist dispute Finance Minister's 2022 growth claims. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 30th January 2023. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. The Minister of Finance of Trinidad and Tobago is reporting that the Trinidad and Tobago's economic growth in 2022 was much better than expected, as instead of a decline in real gross domestic product, Trinidad and Tobago actually recorded 4.1% growth. Now, consultant economist Dr. Indira Sajewan is disputing that.
According to the finance minister, the CSO's data show growth in the economy of 1.6% in the first quarter of 2022 and a substantial 6.6% in the second quarter. This means that for the first half of 2022, real GDP grew by a total of 4.1%. The minister also highlighted growth in the non-energy sector of 4.6% in the first quarter of 2022 and 10.5% in the second quarter. The finance minister says this data demonstrates that our economy is recovering well from the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic and that our diversification efforts are bearing fruit. But consultant economist Dr. Indira Sajewan describes his analysis as politics. As she notes, even the classification of the non-energy sector has been changed.
What happened a few years ago is that the government did something very creative. They removed the petrochemical subsector of energy from oil and gas category and placed it under non-energy. It is not surprising the growth figures that the CSO has published. The unfortunate thing is that this growth in large part is not because of anything to do with our efforts at diversification or improvement therein. The growth really comes from the fact that a war started in February of 2022, which pushed the price of oil and gas and petrochemicals to levels that we had not seen in a very, very long time.
In fact, Dr. Sajewan believes, were it not for external factors, this country would have recorded zero growth.
I'd be very happy for the minister to give us a breakdown of the growth that occurred in that non-energy subsector by the different categories. So, for example, I would like to know non-energy manufacturing. What was its contribution? What was agriculture's contribution? What was tourism contribution? That is, I think, the kind of drill down that we need the minister to provide to us before he talks to the successful effort at economic diversification.
The consultant economist is urging the government to grasp at what she calls low-hanging fruit to make our economy more robust.
Government really needs to get over its love affair with the oil and gas sector. It will continue to remain important, but we need to use the windfall that is happening now in order to transform our non-energy sector. Our sectors such as manufacturing, food production, at the level of primary production, at the level of value added. Because again, when you look at where the world is going in terms of demand, food is going to be the next food. The world is going to have a food shortage.
Renessa Cutting, TV6 News.
It is time for Caribbean democracies to move away from the first-past-the-post electoral system when electing governments, as it does not always reflect the true will of voters. Andre Huey of SKN Newsline tells us who argues this point.
So argues independent member of parliament in Antigua and Barbuda, Asant Michael, who was a guest on the St. Kitts Nevis talk show Issues on Freedom 106.5 FM on Tuesday.
The first-past-the-post system for these small islands is not working, because you cannot have a situation with a popular vote, you have a minority government, and the voice of people, I believe, is the voice of God. And when you have seats as small, because we have certain seats, and the Commonwealth Secretariat has been speaking about this for years, since Lester Bird was there. They should be taking stock of what they become God. They believe they're emperors. They believe they can turn man into woman and woman into man. There must be checks and balances in our system. Accountability for the executive to the legislature. And that is what I am going to seek to do as an independent candidate in the Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda. If we really want to be truly free as black people in our islands, we need to also look at the separation of powers. I don't see how you can have a small parliament, and even in St. Kitts and Nevis, you have a smaller one there than we do. And you have parliamentarians, most parliamentarians who win their seats being ministers in the cabinet. It really should not be, because at the end of the day, those parliamentarians then become loyal to the prime minister who gives them big ministries. And then what happens? They forget that it's the constituents who actually sent them into parliament and gave them a job in the first place.
Mr. Michael, who created history by becoming the first independent candidate to win a seat in the Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda, believes his election is a lesson for Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown and leaders across the region. The Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party won a one-seat majority in the January 18th general elections. I'm Andre Huey for SKN Newsline.
A man who carried a St. Kitts and Nevis passport obtained via the Citizenship by Investment program was arrested in Phuket, Thailand, on request of the authorities of the United States. Glenn Bart of SKN Newsline has that story.
According to U.S. media sources, Peter Coker Jr. was sought by U.S. authorities in relation to charges of fraud and shares manipulation involving two companies, Hometown International and E-Waste Corporation. It is reported that the scheme involved the share price inflation of a small deli in New Jersey, such that its inflated worth was listed as US $100 million. It is understood that Coker Jr. was a partner in a financial services firm in Hong Kong. Two other men were also arrested in connection to the alleged fraud and shares manipulation. Media source Fortune wrote, quote, "The police statement said he had entered Thailand several years ago with a passport from the Eastern Caribbean island of St. Kitts and Nevis, which is one of many nations that sells citizenship in exchange for investment," end quote. News reports say Thai police arrested 54-year-old Coker Jr. on 11 January 2023 after U.S. authorities informed Thai police that he had entered Thailand in December 2022. Thai police found Coker Jr. at a popular tourist area, Surin Beach, Phuket. It is reported that Coker Jr. is ill and had agreed to be extradited. He is being held in a Bangkok jail pending extradition, reports indicate. A response on the matter from local authorities was not immediately available. Glenn Butt reporting for SK Newsline.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Following the announcement of the FBI's involvement in the SSL's major fraud case in Jamaica, there are concerns the investigation may spiral beyond government's control. CVM Live News item has more, as Nasika Aliman reports.
Will the FBI be called in every time there is a crisis in Jamaica? Will they be called in? Is this a new trend? Is this precedent setting?
The question of who invited the FBI is among the lists of concerns being raised as investigations into the unprecedented fraud at SSL continue. Minister of Finance Dr. Nigel Clark announced the FBI's involvement. However, former FBI agent Wilfred Rattigan says he anticipated the announcement to come from more suitable ministers.
We don't know the scope because the minister, and by the way, that's not the minister's purview. I mean, the Minister of Finance doesn't really have a connection to the FBI. It should have been the Minister of National Security or the Prime Minister.
So why wasn't it? With very little understanding of what exactly the FBI has been called in to do, Rattigan says they can only be guided by the government to an extent. Noting with his 30 years of experience, the FBI will follow the investigations to the most logical conclusion.
What that means is you bring them in and you say, okay, the scope of the investigation is SSL, but they see tentacles going elsewhere. They're going to follow those tentacles. And those tentacles could end up in some places where you don't want them to go. And the question is, What will the FBI do at that point?
And they will follow the money. As Rattigan says, if it can be proven that funds were wire transferred and used a U.S. Swiss banking system, then the FBI has immediate jurisdiction to investigate those transfers to see if they were ill-gotten gains.
And if they're ill-gotten gains, they can certainly press charges in America. They can press them in Jamaica. They can convince the local authorities to bring those charges. But by and large, those charges are going to be brought in the United States.
Rattigan notes the JCF doesn't have some of the technical elements the FBI is armed with, as he highlights the agency's specialty in white-collar crimes.
So you're going to need a big data analytics person. You're also going to need a digital forensics expert who can do the track and tracing. They're going to need definitely a forensic accountant, somebody who can follow the money. They're going to need a financial fraud analyst. They're going to need white-collar crime investigative experts.
Rattigan says the FBI's involvement will come at no expense to Jamaica's taxpayers. Nasika Aliman reporting for CVM Live.
St. Lucia and Martinique are strengthening security ties. The island hosted a high-level delegation from the national security apparatus from the French department, which included the commanding officer of the police force in Martinique. Solange Alfred of HTS News Force reports.
An auspicious occasion on Friday as the Office of the Prime Minister and the High Command of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force hosted French law enforcement officials. Prime Minister Philippe J. Pierre also holds the portfolio of National Security Minister. He conversed with French officials through a translator on the importance of this enduring bilateral relationship.
So today I come with a gift of 100 kilos of forensic material.
Pour la forensique, des armes.
For forensic studies and weapons.
Mais tout ça est également accompagné de formation.
But together with this we have training sessions.
The donation from the Gendarmerie Nationale consists of a laboratory hood with some forensic consumables. We intend to use the laboratory hood for our new crime scene units, as well as the consumables will help us in our continued work with forensics, day-to-day work, forensic biology, forensic chemistry, and our other sections coming on, specifically the firearms units.
The diplomatic allies have historically sustained strong relations on security, health, educational and technical cooperation. St. Lucia is one of the main partners of France in the Eastern Caribbean region. Pierre expressed appreciation for the significant gift that will increase the island's forensic capabilities. He highlights both the advantages of St. Lucia and Martinique's geographic proximity, as well as the risks that come with their porous borders.
Being in Martinique is a gateway to Europe, so we have to protect our borders, and we have to ensure that criminality doesn't thrive. Because what happens with me can happen to you, because we are extremely close. So we welcome that cooperation. I'm sure the High Command and the officers of the police force are very happy to have you and to share with your experience and also the goods that you are bringing for us.
Pierre welcomed efforts to strengthen Franco-St. Lucia cooperation, which includes collaboration between the two nations' law enforcement and security agencies in key areas such as maritime surveillance. The government leader is also buoyed by the expert assistance from French counterparts in bolstering the capabilities of St. Lucia's forensic lab.
You spoke about the director of the lab. She is one of St. Lucia's foremost scientists. So again, we're very proud of her. And everybody who works in the ministry, the PS, everybody, we need to work together. Yes. We need to collaborate.
Director of Forensic Science Services, Fernanda Henry, says that the dawn of deepened exchanges in 2021 will continue to prove beneficial on both sides of the channel.
There are some services that we offer here that they don't have over there, so we expect to have this technical exchange and to continue this collaboration because we've seen the fruits of it with respect to our investigations, our forensic investigations and crime fighting.
Just this past Monday, French security officials seized nearly 320 kilograms of cannabis off the waters of the Grenadines. Solange Alfred, HTS News Force.
Hubbard's is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.